Your Highness, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It feels to me as if we were only here a moment ago for the opening of WISE, and now here we are for the closing session. I hope that it has been a thought-provoking few days for you. It certainly has for me. WISE is a melting pot, a cauldron of examples, of ideas, of people doing remarkable work. I have met policymakers, academics, teachers, learners, people trying to take children out of labor and into school. One man from Karachi who told me last night that he was trying to get Bollywood stars to help put school lessons onto mobile phones and then try and put education literally into the hands of those who need it. So the examples of innovation are everywhere, and I think they have been celebrated as they should be over the course of WISE this year. As before, during this closing session, we'll be asking you to contribute your thoughts, whether you're here, whether you're watching on the live stream from anywhere in the world, using Twitter. The hashtag is WISE14, and at various points we'll be putting some of those tweets up onto the screen as well. And there will be the opportunity to ask questions in person too. But first, traditionally in the closing session, we hear from someone whose work has been honored with the WISE Prize for Education, and that is the case again today. Someone whose entire mission, whose life's work has been to educate girls in Africa. So please welcome this year's WISE Prize for Education laureate, Anne Cotton.
Your Highness, Sheikh Amoza bint Nasser, Chairperson of the Qatar Foundation. Your Excellency, Dr. Abdullah bin Ali Al Thani, Chair of WISE, fellow delegates, in the little world in which children have their existence, whoever brings them up, there is nothing so keenly felt or so keenly perceived as injustice. These are the words of Charles Dickens, writing Great Expectations 150 years ago. His finely attuned sense of injustice infuses all his novels, and especially the circumstances of his childhood characters, who have witnessed the crossing of time and seas to enlarge human imagination and compassion. In his afternoon walks around London, Dickens met children who were experiencing a force of neglect and punishment that they were powerless to change. And in our own 21st century, millions of children still endure childhoods without the resources and opportunities that are the foundation for a secure and happy life. Education is the right of every child. It is fundamental to their development and to their welfare. We are gathered at the WISE Summit because every one of us knows and believes this. We are here to learn and to imagine what is possible and to unite to create a world that gives every child an extended quality education. My professional experience is in rural Africa. Imagine life through the eyes of a poor girl. Every morning, you get up in the dark to haul water home. You help your mother fan the embers of yesterday's fire to cook breakfast. As daylight grows, you watch friends from better-off homes make their way to school, and you wonder, what would it like to be like them? But then you think this will never happen, and that your only future is early marriage, early childbirth, and a life of endless days with a heavy round of domestic and agricultural chores. Who might this girl have become? Multiply her loss of education by the loss to tens of millions of girls out of school, and the impact in human misery is incalculable. It is a global catastrophe. We see it in child mortality, maternal mortality, food insecurity, and fragile economies. The exclusion of girls from education is neither neutral nor passive in its impact, and it is manifestly unjust. How then do we restore justice? How do we catalyze education for girls? How do we unlock the transformative power of girls' education, whose benefits hold a positive multiplier like no other? Let me share some of what we have learned. Come back with me to 1991, when girls' exclusion from education was seen as an intractable problem, and one in which cultural resistance on the part of poor parents to the education of their daughters was perceived as being at the root. I went to the village of Mola in Zimbabwe to study this problem, to a community where there were 7 boys for every girl at secondary school. And the community, the parents, the teachers, the chief, with one voice gave me their answer: poverty. Their decisions did not spring from any traditional culture, but from a depth of poverty in which choice is an illusion. When every spending decision has a bearing on survival itself, boys' education was favored over girls because they had the best chance of paid work. They could go to the commercial farms and fisheries and bring money back to the family. Those families' decisions made sense, but they were misunderstood by many of the experts in the field. And this misunderstanding became the accepted knowledge upon which education initiatives were planned. A heavy investment was made in persuading poor families to act in a way that was quite simply not possible. We must reject the unspoken premise that the poor are somehow different, an amorphous mass that makes incomprehensible decisions, that irritate those who think they know. Why can't the poor make responsible decisions, some experts ask. Poor parents share the universal desire for education for their children. No family in our experience has ever turned down educational support for their daughter. Not one. And because this is so, CAMFED has worked for more than 2 decades in partnership with poor families, transforming this desire for girls' education into reality. The community of Mola also taught me about the different dimensions of poverty. The material marks were all too apparent in the patched huts, the swollen stomachs of children, and the thin frames of adults. Yet what of the invisible psychological marks? To be poor is to live in a constant state of anxiety. Nothing is secure, nothing is assured. The human imagination is reduced to an obsession with money and how to get small, very small amounts that can halt a family's fall into complete destitution. Imagine the psychological impact on a mother as she watches her child cry for want of food. Imagine the fear of mothers and fathers as they watch for late rains that they hope will bring the next harvest. Imagine a family that takes their sick son to the rural clinic in a wheelbarrow, but then refuses to allow him to go to hospital because they are afraid that he will die there. And if he does, they will not be able to afford to bring his body home. I met this family in Mola after their 8-year-old son had died. These lessons about the dehumanizing burden of poverty form the foundation of CAMFED's model for girls' educational inclusion. Inclusion is one of the keys to our program's success. We invite poor communities to be our partners, and we build those partnerships around the girl. And in recognizing the psychological impact of poverty, We build programs that reflect back to each girl her intrinsic importance. We measure her carefully for uniforms that fit. We give her sturdy shoes. We follow her academic progress. We don't exclude her for poor performance. And we act swiftly to support her if she is ill. And in this behavior, we publicly affirm that each girl is entitled to our respect and service. This commitment raises a girl's status in her own eyes, a fundamental step in her path out of poverty. Does this sound idealistic to you? Some years ago, when I explained our model to an audience, someone made the statement, "It sounds wonderful, but this high-touch approach can't be scaled." Not so. Since 1993, more than 3 million children and young people have benefited from CAMFED programs at primary, secondary, and tertiary levels across Ghana, Malawi, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And in October this year, CAMFED was officially recognized by the OECD as a model of best practice in taking education innovation to scale. The world has proved enough times that it can scale cruelty and violence. Compassion and kindness must be scaled to create a world of justice for children. Let me describe how. CAMFED's impact extends beyond girls' education. We help communities develop the thing they need most, rich new sources of capital. Knowledge capital that is critical for programs to work, pre-exist CAMFED's work in the community. Grandmothers who are heading households. They hold vital knowledge about the psychological effects of death of someone close on themselves and on the children they care for. CAMFED's task is to create the opportunities that will enable them to share their knowledge, including having the confidence that they will be respected and listened to carefully. 2 weeks ago, I was in Malawi, and I visited one of the 176 preschools that we support. In the early morning, 10 local mothers were preparing and serving nutritious porridge to 70 small children, something they do every day from Monday to Friday. I asked the mothers if they thought that some of the children were more vulnerable than others. "Yes," one replied. "We can see those who are the most hungry by the way they eat, and we give them extra." Only the mothers in this community would have the knowledge to detect in little children's behavior these signs of deprivation and act immediately. Institutional capital is also recognized by CAMFED, and we work with existing structures such as government schools and clinics, chieftaincies and their courts, and faith-based leaders and their mosques and churches. CAMFED also catalyzes the emergence of new institutions. Community development committees, for example, were conceived as a joined-up system of local government officers and community activists, ensuring that the knowledge and power of all constituencies is brought to the table to educate and advance girls' education. They all contribute as volunteers. And perhaps the greatest evidence of the impact of our work is the institution of CAMA, an alumni network of all the secondary school graduates. It provides a forum in which young women can grow their decision-making and leadership capabilities. How do elites consolidate their power? Through their alumni. And this is what we have created for one of the most disadvantaged social groups in the world today, girls in rural Africa. Let me share CAMFED's genesis. When in 1998, Lucy Lake, my colleague of 20 years and now CAMFED's chief executive officer, and I realized that the first groups of girls graduating from secondary education faced a dangerous transition into young adulthood, we examined the problem with the girls themselves. CAMA was born by the first 400 girls to complete secondary education with CAMFED support. Today, CAMA has 24,436 members across Ghana, Malawi, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. They are Muslims and Christians. They speak around Thank you. Well, they are Muslims and Christians. They speak around 30 different languages, and from this broad background, they share a broad vision. In their own words, they are united by a background of rural poverty and the determination to transform their communities. They have delayed marriage and motherhood. Their example as role models is having a powerful impact. In Malawi, for example, 5% of the young women who have received CAMFED bursaries have become mothers, compared to 27% nationally in the same age group. Each CAMA member was once a barefoot child, unable to say her name with confidence. Angeline Muramirwa was top in her district's primary school exams, but her parents could not afford to send her to secondary school. Neighbors sympathized with their disappointment. It's a shame. Those who have too many pumpkins don't have the pots to cook them. She was supported by CAMFED throughout her adolescence and young adulthood. She is now CAMFED's Regional Executive Director in Africa. And she is leading the delivery of the UK's investment to support 139,000 girls in secondary education in Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Tanzania. In 1993, Ronyararo Machingaidzi wrote to me of her longing for education. If only I get a chance, I will do something great. Today, she is Dr. Machingaidzi. She is a doctor in Namibia. Patricia Mangoma set up a small rural business with a grant from CAMFED. Its early profits supported her brothers and sisters to go to school. She employed young people in her community. Patricia supported the creation of CAMFED's seed money program. It's now in place across 5 countries and has so far led to the establishment of almost 10,000 businesses. Patricia is with us here today. Angeline, Ronyararo, Patricia, they are just 3 of the 24,436 CAMA members. Others are winning awards and accolades. Ruka Yaro de Liman, a leading CAMA member in Ghana, was honored with a Mandela Washington Fellowship at President Obama's Young African Leaders Summit just 3 months ago. And Abigail Kayundu sits on the UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon's Youth Advisory Group for Education. CAMA's collective power grows exponentially. Members are supporting at least 2 or 3 children beyond their extended family. 2,033 are learner guides, improving the quality and relevance of education in rural schools, powerful role models for the next generation. More than 154,000 people have been trained by CAMA in financial literacy, which leads me to financial capital. This includes training in financial management, critical to the eradication of poverty. How can communities grow their decision-making around financial resources if they're not allowed to handle them? This risk-averse practice infantilizes poor people and undermines their confidence and trust. In our program, everyone in the community knows how much and when money will arrive. Everyone is accountable to the child. The financial resources are dedicated to them and protected for them. Our financial systems are extremely tight, designed by Luxon Shumba, our finance director, and linked to our data monitoring system so that we can track investments as well as school enrollment and retention. Let's return to Charles Dickens. He never got over the shame at the fact that when his father went to prison for being unable to pay his debts, he became a child laborer in a blacking factory. His biographer only revealed these details 2 years after his death. Dickens understood poverty because he had lived it. Poverty creates embarrassment and shame. CAMA members understand this, but they have transformed these marks of poverty into pride and empathy. Pride in their own and their families' struggles, and empathy for those who are like they once were. They are moving into health and education institutions and transforming them from within. Dr. Ranyararo Machingaidzi said to me, "When I'm at the hospital and I see a nurse being unkind to a poor woman, I say to her, 'Don't speak to that woman that way. She could be my mother.' And she is shocked because she does not think that a doctor in a white coat was from a poor rural home." And remember the little girl we imagined as I began? As we gather here, she does not know that the Wise Prize that I am honored to receive will transform her future in a way that she cannot begin to imagine. She does not know that her step across the threshold of a classroom will be a step for justice. We are committing to support 1 million more girls through secondary education over the next 5 years. Their latent transformative power will then become real. They will transform the lives of generations to come. Your Highness, Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, join them. There is no time to lose. Thank you.
And I think that reception from everyone here really says it all about why you are such a worthy winner of the Wise Prize for Education. We have a few minutes to discuss your work, and I suppose we should start really with what the money will go towards. It is this mission to translate what you have done into secondary education for girls.
Yes, indeed, Michelle, and thank you. We are committing this to the 1 million girls that we will support through secondary education over the next 5 years in rural Africa.
In which countries? The countries you're already working?
We will be working, continuing our work and expanding our work in Ghana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Tanzania and Malawi, but we also plan to expand further afield to more countries.
Well, I know everyone here will wish you the best of luck with your work. And I'd just like to say that anyone who would like to ask a question of Anne, you can put it on Twitter or you can raise your hands and I'm sure she'll be pleased to answer them. I wondered, though, about you said in your speech that not one family to whom you had offered financial support for their girls had ever turned it down. And I wonder, when you look at the data on the families that you have helped, is there evidence that there is less early marriage and that what you have done is changing the lives of those families?
Yes, indeed. I talked about grandmothers. Grandmothers face the most enormous crises because they are looking after their grandchildren and they are deeply, deeply concerned and worried about the future. So, they might have 5, 6 children. And so a girl who will be taken care of during her adolescence by marrying, that is something that might secure the future of the rest of the children. This is not a decision that she is taking out of a lack of interest and a lack of care for that girl. It is a decision based on survival needs. And indeed, in Malawi, where we are supporting large numbers of girls, just 5% of the adolescent girls that we support become mothers, as opposed to 27% nationally. There's very clear indications. You know, families want education, and they will strive to keep their daughters in education.
And in a country like Zimbabwe, you know, a tough country in many ways for outsiders, I wonder, how are you perceived? What is it like being a white woman trying to deliver education in a country like Zimbabwe?
Well, of course, in the early days, it was me, and I was welcomed in Zimbabwe. When I went to the Nyami district, I felt deeply the implications of the colonial context, because this was a place where the Tonga people had been forcibly resettled when the Kariba Dam was built in 1956, and they had lived in a state of poverty ever since. Despite that, despite the fact that I was from the UK, they welcomed me, they were kind and hospitable. And of course now, our work is led by our teams. We have a wonderful executive team in Africa, all recruited from Africa as a policy. That has been our policy from the word go. So it is a Zimbabwean institution.
How wonderful. Please do raise your hands if you have a question or a comment for Anne. We'll take a few of them. Yes.
Thank you. Has the example of your program made better boys and made them more sensitive to the world we share?
Well, of course, CAMFED's work, while we focus on girls' education because they face the greatest hurdles in having a continuing education, our reality, our organization, believes in the education of every single child. So our work is very inclusive. And that means that the men in the community are very much involved. The chiefs are some of our greatest advocates. I remember one saying at a meeting, you know, we have to understand that girls are refugees in their own motherland. Boys themselves know that in the classroom they outnumber girls. They know that their sisters are at home. And so I think for us, what it is about is building that understanding, building that collaboration, not having an exclusive focus, but saying this is about the progress of the entire community. And of course, boys recognizing that, you know, that change, that virtuous cycle you can create through girls' education benefits everyone.
Yeah.
And every boy too, as well as every girl, will be born into a different family.
That statistic you had really jumped out at me, that when you began, there were 7 boys for every girl in some of the classrooms you went to.
Yes, that was in Mola, Nyami district. That was some of the starkest data. And so, of course, girls were a minority in the classroom. They lacked confidence. They participated as a minority in what was essentially a male school environment. That was a problem of itself.
Gosh. We're going to come to question there.
Salute to you for your noble, humble work. And then the initial question is, who and what inspired you initially?
My inspiration comes from many sources. I think my background in South Wales is a great source of inspiration. I am from a family, formerly a mining community. My grandmother left school when she was 12 years old and was apprenticed to a milliner. She was passionate about education, and she was an inveterate social worker in her community. I used to have to help her on you know, with these tasks, going up and down, delivering plates of food and things. And she always signed her letters to me, "Please excuse grammar and spelling." And that, of course, I didn't understand the impact of that as a child. Growing up, I understood it. And this idea that she understood what she had lost, she was then passionate about education. My father was, you know, caught that, and he was an absolutely committed educationalist and committed to the education of every child. He got a scholarship to go to university, the first in the family. So that infuses my life and has become stronger and stronger. And as when I went to Zimbabwe, it was somehow that the threads of my life came together. My life as a mother and my utter, my sense of how it would feel for me to be unable to give my children what they needed. And the depth of emotional pain that would have wrought in my life. And seeing that in the lives of mothers whose children and babies were dying for the want of so little.
And then there. Go ahead.
Anibaseyo, Axiom Learning Nigeria. Thank you for sharing the phenomenal piece of work. If I may ask you, what has been, it's more of a personal question, what's been the greatest challenge you faced in doing this work? And how did you overcome that challenge?
You know, it's a hard one, that, because for me, there's never been an option that the challenge, in a way, has become too great. And of course, what has happened is that a community has been built around comfort. So while I have the opportunity to have the limelight today, of course, there are so many have supported me on this journey. Lucy Lake, who is my great colleague, and we have faced challenges together. And so when you face challenges as a community, it's different.
Is funding the biggest one?
Funding, well, we have a tremendous network of partners, and I think what is happening is our donors tend to look at us and see the value and the impact of our work, see our evidence base, and say, we will continue and we will multiply that. I think what it is about is working with donors so that they understand the model and will invest in the model.
Can we take question 4?
Hello, Anne. Hey again. I asked you this question before. I'm going to ask it again for the benefit of the crowd, so you already know the reply. What made you sustain your motivation, your great motivation to pursue your project to the end? Thank you.
You know, with seeing what I see now, I could not have wished for a more wonderful life and career. When I sat in a recent conference in London, and I sat in the audience and I listened to Angeline Murumira, who I have known since she was 13 years old, and there she is on the stage. That, for me, is the greatest gift, and that sustains me and will continue to sustain me.
Anne Cotton, thank you so much. Congratulations on being this year's WISE Prize laureate. And we look forward to seeing your work flourish. Thank you very much. Anne Cotton. And of course, there are many more Angelines out there in those countries waiting to be reached by the work of Anne and others. And now, Your Highness, ladies and gentlemen, our closing panel, a chance for some final thoughts on what we've heard here at WISE, on what Anne has brought up, and indeed the education of the future. So I'd like to ask my 3 panelists to come up on stage now. Thank you. Well, a warm welcome to you all, and let me introduce the panel to you. Delighted to welcome Jacques Lang, the former French Minister of Culture for many years, also the French Minister of Education, now the President of the Institut du Monde Arabe in Paris, which is a quite remarkable and wonderful place for anyone who doesn't know it already. Also delighted to have as part of the panel Sarah Kamal, who graduated in International Affairs from Qatar University and is a WISE learner. And also Charles Leadbeater, who's the author of several books on innovation, including looking at educational solutions around the world, learning apps. Charles, you were the author of the 2011 WISE book, and you have a new book out, which is called Learning to Make a Difference. So, Sarah, perhaps we can start with you. Just you're a WISE learner. You've been graduated through the education system here in Qatar. Creativity in education has been the theme here, and I wonder what that means to you.
Creativity to me, I truly believe that all human beings are creative by nature, but how can we make my creativity, your creativity, as our creativity? And I truly felt that at the Learners program here at WISE. We come from different backgrounds. We're all creative. We come from different backgrounds, different cultures from around the world, but we come here to create one innovative idea to tackle a solution that we feel must be fixed in this world.
Charles, what does it mean to you? Because you've seen examples from right around the world of people doing things differently.
Yes, well, I think Sarah just put it incredibly well. If you listen to what she just said, it's about having a purpose, tackling a problem that matters. It's about making something, making a difference, and it's about coming together. And if you then think about what Anna's just said, I mean, what Anna's just described is not just a schools program. CAMFED is a kind of growing community which has become ever more creative, and it's become ever more creative around a kind of cause or a mission. And that's what sustained it. And actually, all innovation comes from communities. Individuals play a vital role, but innovation is sustained by creative communities, and usually creative communities which have a sense of mission and cause. And if we want school to encourage young people to become innovative, to coach the habits and culture of innovation and creativity, then school has to become more like a creative community with a cause. It has to become a place where children go to learn how to explore and make, to collaborate with other people, and to find their own purpose and passion.
Yeah. It is a compelling idea, a creative community. And yet, Monsieur Lang, if we look at the education systems in many rich countries, including France, you wouldn't call this a flexible system, would you? For France has an excellent education system, but one that is pretty strict.
Merci d'abord, félicitations.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for having organized this panel and having accepted to have so many languages available in this session.
Ça m'évite de parler dans mon anglais très rustique.
It allows me to not try to speak in my very limited English, which would have been very harsh to your ears. Well, it's indeed true. It's true that even in France, the highly centralized system where teachers are trained at the national level, or where the curricula are designed at a national level, let's say there's not much room for innovation and creativity. But there are certain other countries, the Nordic countries, the United States, and even here, in fact, even in Qatar, because yesterday I visited the Lycée Voltaire, and I saw how there was this blending of different cultures. There are about 30 different nationalities present, and they learned both the arts and the sciences together. And there was a lot more room for creativity than one would have in high schools in France.
Do you wish that you could have that in high schools in France? Because what Anne was talking about, the waste of human potential when children are not educated at all, in the case of some children in Africa, that can still happen in a country like France, where a child, the system doesn't suit the child, or the system is not flexible enough for the child.
Je crois que vous avez tout à fait raison.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Because, well, the French system is something that I'm familiar with. The French system is good for good students. It's excellent for excellent students. But unfortunately, very often is not able to solve the problem of the 20% of underachievers who give up. And we are not able to help those students. And it is indeed a loss of potential. It is very sad. It is a source of suffering for those children and their families and for society as a whole. And that is the reason why, when I was Minister of Education, I tried to completely revamp the pedagogical systems and the school curricula.
Charles, from what you've seen in different parts of the world, where are the systems, and Monsieur Lang has pointed to some of the Nordic countries, but where are the systems which are really addressing the challenges that education faces?
Well, I think you're going to see people voting with their feet to some extent, because I think the frustration with the inadequacy of traditional, conventional, rather rigid, standardized academic forms of learning is leaving too many people disappointed. And so I think you're seeing elements of, say, low-cost private schools or alternative provision in the developing world, which are developing different kinds of curricula. I think around the world you're seeing an enormous growth in alternative kinds of vocational oriented provision. And I think you're seeing creative uses of technology which will come sort of outside and around the education system. Open badges promoted by Mozilla, the thing that I'm chair of, Apps for Good, which are creating new ways which are more interactive, more collaborative, more productive. They're about making, not just sitting and writing out or doing exams. So I think you're seeing all of that. But what we need is we need some of the leading jurisdictions in the world, Finland, British Columbia, Alberta, Victoria, Singapore, to really grasp the nettle and acknowledge that the current system, driven by PISA and all those sorts of league tables, that lets too many people down, and there is a way to do it differently, which is not a huge risk. That actually it makes sense. This is common sense now.
Is it really not a huge risk? I mean, to revamp your education system, it's a brave politician who
I think the
does
current
that.
system is a huge risk because actually it wastes such an enormous potential in young people. It's actually, we're taking huge risks at the moment. We're taking huge risks with a system that delivers graduates to unemployment in the United States.
Sarah, as a wise learner, you saw different systems around the world, the wise learners sharing their experiences. I wonder what your own experience was like, the extent to which you have been encouraged to be a free thinker within the constraints of the system.
Yes, I do consider myself as a free spirit. And when I was in high school, I wasn't allowed to debate or question the system and how the tools they were teaching us. But at university, at Qatar University, we have so many teachers from different backgrounds, and they allowed me to debate, to question, and to be very creative and innovative in my ideas. It takes the teacher to allow you to be creative. For example, I had a presentation, and I thought it's boring, and I don't want to do it. 5 hours, I told my professor, you know what? I want to change my topic. I want to say how the Gundam Style song affected the South Korean economy. And I want to speak about that. And he was, okay, do it. And it was great.
But you needed the license from him to do it.
Yeah.
Well, Monsieur Lang, you know, you spent a long time as the French cultural minister, and I wonder whether you think that a way to inject this kind of innovation and flexibility into mainstream education is by emphasizing the role of arts and culture.
C'est une question très importante.
Well, this is indeed a very interesting question that you have just raised. Nietzsche, you know, said that the people who lived in his times believed that the role of art in society was like a sort of a trinket, you know, just like a decorative item, that something that one would clip onto one's jacket. And I believe that art shouldn't simply be a trinket. But it should be at the very core, at the very heart of education. And this is really what World Innovation Summit for Education actually means. It should be really at the heart of educating a child, like the princes during the Renaissance were trained in music, in singing, in theater, in poetry. So it's not just a luxury, it's a necessity. And this is the reason why in my own country I wanted to implement a national plan for all the schools of the country, not just experimental schools, but mainstream schools. I wanted to include art in the school curricula, because I'm absolutely convinced that this is necessary. I'm absolutely convinced that introducing art and culture as fundamental subjects in school is indeed a way of having better access to other fundamental subjects, mathematics, languages, etc. Art in school gives self-confidence to the child. It enables the child to take risks. There is no education without risk-taking. There is no education without making mistakes, without failure. So the school is sort of a door opener. It's like, the art in school is like, you know, an open sesame towards other subjects.
But you know the barriers that exist to that kind of risk-taking. The opinion poll that was conducted ahead of WISE said it was the assessment methods, because every teacher knows that they will be judged on the exam results of their children, and not many parents want their children to be the ones who are experimented upon.
Premièrement, well, first and foremost, if the conventional system is maintained, and I think it should be changed, I think that art and culture, what I'm saying, should be part and parcel of the assessment process, of the final exams themselves. And I think that we probably need to have a sort of a vertical organization of the system. You know, Einstein said something really wonderful. He said, if you want your children to be intelligent, read them fairy tales. And if you want them to be even more intelligent, read them even more fairy tales.
Thank you. Could I ask you in the audience, please raise your hand and we'll get microphones to you as before if you'd like to comment on anything.
Yes, hello. I am Wadha from Qatar. My question is to Mr. Lang. On sait que la France, quand on dit la France, c'est l'art. C'est dans tous les aspects. La gastronomie, la peinture, la poésie, tout ça. Mais dans les écoles françaises, il n'y a pas cet aspect, cette concentration de l'art. Et il y a un fossé, je trouve, entre les écoles primaires, secondaires et les grandes écoles. Moi, je viens de terminer mon Executive MBA à HEC. Mais on trouve que la crème de la crème des études supérieures se trouve en France. HEC était le numéro 1, 3 ans consécutifs. Alors que les écoles primaires et secondaires, il y a un fossé entre ça et les grandes écoles. Pourquoi et qu'est-ce que vous devez faire? C'est pour ça quand on dit à quelqu'un, j'ai fait HEC, il me dit, oh, mais c'est génial, c'est difficile d'entrer pour les Français, parce qu'il y a cette fossé. Donc, comment adresser ce problème? Merci.
Thank you very much. I'm going to take a couple more questions before I come back to the panel.
Youssef Gaboun, founder of New Open Education. My question is for Charles. Actually, if you were called by a country to redesign its education system, or more precisely, its schooling system, how would you do it differently? And this time, not with the objective of producing hard-working, docile workers, easily moldable to the changing needs of the industry, the government, and the army, but with the purpose of producing citizens with strong critical thinking skills, with creativity, with leadership, values, and communityship. How would you do it? Would you take the Finland system as a model and bring it, let's say, to this country? Would you go as far as creating Sudbury Valley schools, with extremely education? How would you do it step by step?
Thank you. I'm just going to take one more question, microphone 5, before we come back to the panel.
I am Amadou Ba from Sierra Leone. I'd rather speak in French. The question is for Dr. Lang. Dr. Lang, moi je viens de la Sierra Leone, mais il y a un constat que le français est en déclin en Afrique. Voilà, par exemple, je peux vous citer, dans mon pays, le français, on n'enseigne plus, il y avait l'Alliance française en Sierra Leone. Mais j'ai appris que le gouvernement français a fermé l'Alliance française en Sierra Leone. À votre place, en tant que l'ancien ministre de l'Éducation, que allez-vous faire pour résoudre ce problème? Parce que en matière de créativité, on sait que si nous avons plus de langues, on peut mieux travailler, on peut mieux communiquer, la globalisation, c'est la langue. Il faut ça, c'est absolument. Donc, je vais vous demander, que allez-vous faire maintenant pour résoudre ce problème à votre place? Merci.
Thank you. Before I'm going to ask Monsieur Lang in a moment just to answer those two questions that are relating to the French language and elite schools in France, although clearly French is not on the decline on the panel or in the audience here. So I think the French can be reassured on that front. But Charles, can I ask you first to address this point? If you were starting from scratch, paint a picture of your ideal system.
Oh, if I were starting from scratch, what I would say is the problem with the system we've got is that the industrial aspect of it, the teaching, sitting in rows, listening, teaching to the test, is far too big. And I would crunch that right down to maybe a third of the size at the moment. And I would do that really efficiently with technology and very good teachers. And I would make sure that basic literacy, mathematics, core history, science was done really, really well. And then in the space created, I would do a number of other things. I would, first of all, I would make sure that virtually all children had an experience of being peer learners where they helped other children learn, because I think that's a vital aspect. The alumni aspect of CAMFED is a vital component. So I would make sure they do that. Secondly, I would make sure they leave school having made lots of things. Made films.
Physically, with their
physically.
hands.
It could be making models, it could be making a business, it could be making food, but that going to school is a kind of productive making activity, not just
something active
and creative, and crucially doing it with other people. And I would make sure that going to school was a place where you went to ask and open up questions rather than just deliver the answer that's required, and that children would leave school with a much, much more rounded account of themselves and their achievements, with some qualifications, absolutely for sure, but with a lot else to talk about themselves when they go and present themselves to people they want to work with. But I just wanted also just quickly to refer to this Syrian gentleman's question, because actually the proportion of children in school is going up everywhere in the world but in conflict zones. And in conflict zones, it's not going up at all. Yeah. And if there is a case for innovation to find innovative new ways to deliver education in low-cost, flexible ways, it is in precisely these kinds of places.
Yes. And also in terms of Syrian refugees, I think their chances of getting an education is very different depending on which countries they ended up in. So Her Highness has seen what's happening in Turkey, which is very positive. I think in Lebanon it's much more difficult, and I'm going to be seeing that for myself with Syrian refugees in Lebanon next week. Sarah, I wonder what you think, listening to Charles's ideal picture, because you were pointing out the difference between the way that you were encouraged at university compared to school.
I totally believe that creativity must be at the heart in school. Start with teachers, opening up for their students to be more creative and innovative. And in schools is where you'll see the difference. You'll see these skills building up. You'll see leaders. You'll see entrepreneurs. You'll see what we want for this world. Start from the root with the teachers.
Thank you. Monsieur Lang, so the two questions for you about the decline of French. I mean, obviously you're not in government now, but what is happening with the encouraging of French in other parts of the world? And also, I mean, this is one of the most striking features of the French education system, the elite schools. Great for those who graduate from those schools, but a barrier for many others.
D'abord,
First of all, as you mentioned yourself, two questions were asked in French, and I'm sure many others could have been asked in French as well. We are in Qatar. We're in a country. I'm a nationalist. I'm nationalist at all. I'm an internationalist, if anything. But I've always said that I'm always struck by the love for the French language in Qatar. We have 2 secondary schools, the Bonaparte School and the Voltaire School. And there are so many people here in this very room who speak wonderful French. The Emir himself, when he came to Paris, when he came on a state visit in the month of June, made his speech at the Élysée Palace, the presidential palace, in French. And for us, for all of us present, it was a very emotional moment. Well, yes, well, you're right about French being on the decline. Well, I would like to ask the question to the Minister of Education in Sierra Leone and to see why this is so. The young lady who spoke remarkable French, the Qatari lady, who really raised a very important issue about the French education system. Indeed, the French system targets a very high level of excellence in the schools, universities, and in research programs. But then there is this question that I mentioned earlier. We have a highly selective system, so it leaves thousands of children and students by the wayside. Because of this, they lose hope, and this is inadmissible. This is unacceptable, and that is why I think that there is a need to change the education system in France. It should be based on creativity, so that all these children can go back to school.
What do you think of the kind of system that Charles talked about then? If you were back in government and doing that Minister of Education job again today, what would you do?
Mais je crois qu'il a raison d'ailleurs. Les expériences.
I think he's absolutely right. In fact, all the personal and the very positive experiments that were conducted in France and even elsewhere. Recently, I was in Morocco, in the Hassan II University, and I noticed that students succeed because we not only teach them law over there, but also art and culture. The French Nobel Prize winner for economics works in a center in Toulouse, which opens its doors to all sorts of subjects and different ways of teaching that focus on all the different aspects of life. And I think that is the way forward.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to more questions from the audience. Microphone 5, then 4, then 2. Go ahead, let's start here.
Thank you. Phil McRae from Alberta, Canada. Excellent education systems are achieved through equity, and inequality is growing in Canada and indeed around the world. So my question for the panel is, how do we achieve excellence in education systems with rapidly growing inequalities, and specifically in public education systems like we have in Canada?
Thank you. That's such an important point. Yes, question over there.
Hi, my name is Diana Aldejani. I'm a founder of EduTechnos, online games to teach children Arabic, and we look forward to inspire children to fall in love with Arabic language. And from my experience, one of the small challenges that I faced was basically because of my profession, which is computer engineering, and I'm not an Arabic teacher, and I don't have PhD in Arabic as well. So my questions regard the credibility of the creative idea that you have. Other than keep the research going on, keep moving forward, surrounding myself with the experts in this matter, do you have any other recommendations?
Sorry, do you mean that you think that the product that you've created doesn't have an inherent credibility because you're not an Arabic teacher yourself?
I've been facing such questions. For example, when you talk to people that you want to establish or start a research, what's your credibility? You're not a PhD. But I keep joking, saying I don't even have a box to think outside it. I'm the best candidate. So is there any recommendation you guys can tell me?
Okay, one for Charles in a moment. Can we go to microphone 3 and then back, or 2, and then we'll go to 3? Yes.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shweta Jacqueline, and the founder of United for Autism. I am probably coming from different field, which is education, but for special needs children. My question to all, actually, not only the panelists, is should these children get involved into all this what you're doing in here? Should they be part on imagining, creating, learning, and getting together with all the rest of the children? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And question up there.
السلام عليكم. أخوكم فهد السبيعي من دولة الكويت معلم
I'm an Arabic professor in Kuwait. First of all, I would like to thank Qatar for having organized this summit. And secondly, I hold every Arabic-speaking person in the room responsible for not having spoken in Arabic today. And thirdly, well, I was waiting for the right moment, in fact, to ask my question in Arabic. And I believed that the former French minister can probably wear his headset to understand my question properly. The question is, what is the role that language plays in creativity?
He is. Thank you. The role of language in creativity. Thank you. Actually, Sarah, let me turn to you because I mean, obviously you've grown up in a multilingual environment here in Qatar. How much of a role do you think that has played in the broadening of minds?
For me to be bilingual, first of all, I had difficulties learning Arabic, because I studied in the United States, and to learn Arabic was a challenge. But I noticed that if I give an effort to learn it, I can be more creative. I was actually surprised that I can write in Arabic and people can be shocked. Creativity can come with languages, of course, but you have to have the will to fail again, and fail better. Of course, the learners are laughing because they know where it comes from.
Monsieur Lang, you know, one of the things you are remembered for in France is the events that you set up every year, the musical events, the Fête de la Musique, which take place not just in France but in other countries as well. I mean, music, we've already talked about arts, music, language. These are all things that train your brain in different ways and that can help unlock its potential.
Oui, et parfois traverse plus aisément
yes, absolutely, absolutely. And these things cross borders more easily than others. I think we need to strike a balance between the national traditions and national languages, as the gentleman just mentioned, and this desire to open one's doors to the world. And this is something that I find that Qatar has done particularly successful. This desire to find its roots in its history, but at the same time a lot of tolerance for the rest, for other cultures and other peoples of the world. As to teaching Arabic, this is something that we spoke about with Her Highness yesterday, and I have the deepest respect for the work that she is doing and for the organization of this summit. We teach Arabic, of course, in France. It is a necessity. It's a universal language which represents and embodies universal culture. It is a political and economic necessity as well. And this morning, I believe that Al Jazeera's organizers explained to me that this is through the website I learned that this is something that is being developed across the world. I think it's important not to accept a culture based on a single language. Quite the opposite. We should encourage all sorts of languages because they embody creativity. I think it is necessary for young people to learn other languages, and over here in particular, they should be allowed to learn Arabic, of course.
Charles, can I ask you to respond to the question about the inclusion of children with special needs, which is, of course, incredibly important, and not just learning needs, but, you know, the particular difficulties that disabled children have in some parts of the world in getting access, and also the point about when you come up with new solutions and how to present them.
Yes, so actually Phil's question is about equity, and so was this lady's question really about the treatment of children with special needs. And so the answer in a way to both questions is the same in a sense, which is when I started researching personalized learning now more than 10 years ago, I went first to schools working with children with special needs because they recognized that children with different needs could be treated in different ways and that schools had to become flexible and creative spaces to find different solutions to work with children in different ways. And if you simply took that recipe and then applied it to huge secondary schools, which are standardized factories, actually, then you'd create a different kind of education system. So I continue to think that actually people with disabilities have huge amounts to teach other people in how to live well. And so to Phil's point about equity in these systems, the trouble is these systems are designed to do well for 30% of people who are academically attuned, cognitively equipped, and probably come from middle-class backgrounds. And as talent systems, if we were to judge education systems as talent development systems, they're dreadful. They waste huge amounts of talent. So the cause of equity is the cause of innovation. The reason to want innovation is for equity, to create more flexible, adaptive, appropriate, creative, engaging ways of learning for all of the population to bring out all of their skills. And at the moment, we write them off. Finally, if you're a startup, you have to be persistent and you have to really attack a problem that no one else wants to attack. So I would recommend starting where children are finding it hard to learn, but your approach can gain some traction by showing that it's starting to have a real impact. Apps for Good, the program that I am chair of, we started 4 years ago in a community centre in South London with 8 unemployed young men to show that if you could create a creative learning program using apps on mobile phones, you could engage disengaged people. We're now in 400 schools with 20,000 students. That started from a problem and showing that you could really engage hard-to-reach people. So start small with a really important problem.
And don't give up.
Don't give up.
Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking all of our panel, Charles Leadbeater, Sarah Kamal, Jacques Lang. Thank you. Thank you very much. Don't forget to pick up a copy of Charles' latest book on your way out of the room. Now, some closing thoughts, because we are in our last few minutes here, and it's my pleasure to welcome back on stage the chairman of WISE, Dr. Abdullah bin Ali Al Thani.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Your Highness, Sheikh Hamoza bint Nasser, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are approaching the end of 3 intense and productive days at WISE 2014. We have listened to inspiring and challenging speakers and held lively debates and workshops. Many of you have commented favorably on the opportunities to connect and share ideas. The informal sessions have also been instructive, and I'm pleased so many of you took the opportunity to engage in hands-on learning opportunities in the Majlis. We hope this will continue as an important feature of our future summits. Yesterday's session of the Education Above All Foundation increased our resolve to end the totally unacceptable situation of the many children around the world who have no access to high-quality schooling. And I am sure that, like me, you are all grateful for the inspiring reflections of our latest Prize of Education laureate, Anne Cotton. Anne truly embodies the determination and commitment to change that Her Highness Sheikh Hamouza bint Nasser set out to spread when she launched this great movement over 6 years ago. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, WISE has achieved a significant amount through its strategy of constructive collaboration. The cumulative effect of our programs over the years is making a difference to very many people. We have put in place a foundation and framework to help build the kind of education people need now and in the future. On a personal note, I would like to say it is an honor to contribute to the fulfillment of Her Highness' vision, and I'm thankful for entrusting this initiative to me since its inception. The essence of WISE, however, does not only lie in what is said here at our annual summit, or even in our numerous continuing programs. It is in the hearts and minds of thousands of individuals around the world who make up our extended WISE community. It is you who provide the ideas, energy, and concrete action which are having an impact upon societies around the world. We will be reaching out to you soon to help define the agenda for WISE in the year ahead, including the next summit. Let us therefore leave here with renewed determination to find fresh ways to tackle the problems of access, quality, and relevance of education at all levels and in all localities. This week's summit has reminded us that the path from imagination to achievement leads through creativity, and the scale of the problems we face demands that we apply our collective creativity to finding and implementing solutions. I thank you all for your input, and I urge you to remain connected and continue this important work. Thank you, وفي حفظ الله ورعايته.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Abdullah. And, you know, none of this would be possible without the work that you and your team put in 365 days of the year, because the WISE effort is ongoing all the time. So thank you very much. And as Dr. Abdullah said, WISE is about thought and about practice. And I'd like to remind you all that applications for the 2015 WISE Awards are open now. The search is on for the next batch of innovative educational projects making a difference to the communities they serve. So all the details of who's eligible, how to apply are on the WISE website, and the deadline is January the 15th, 2015. Also, some dates for your diary, because WISE 2015 will take place on these dates next year, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th of November. So hopefully many people will be back in Doha for that. Something to look forward to. It remains only for me to thank Her Highness for being with us, and to thank you all for the contribution that you make to WISE and for the role that you play in the flourishing of this conversation. May it always be so. I wish you all well. I wish you a safe journey home. Thank you all. Goodbye.